Insaf's treatment in Port Sudan. Isolation and vulnerability. Upon arrival in Port Sudan, Insaf, using the name Iqbal, is utterly alone, exhausted, and desperate. She has no family, friends, or resources in the city. She is immediately exposed to danger. A strange man stalks her, attempts to kidnap her, and she narrowly escapes sexual assault thanks to the intervention of a taxi driver who is also a police informant. The police, after rescuing her, are only able to help because she presents the card of Officer Khaled, whom she met on the train. She is then delivered to his family. Suspicion and conditional hospitality. Officer Khaled's family, his wife Salwa and mother Khadija, receive Insaf with suspicion and reluctance. They question her motives, background, and the truthfulness of her story. Salwa, in particular, is jealous and wary, fearing Insaf may threaten her marriage or bring shame to the household. Insaf is treated as an outsider, and her presence is a source of anxiety and gossip among neighbors. She is not truly accepted, and her stay is precarious, dependent on Khaled's goodwill and the family's sense of obligation. Social pressure and scandal. When Insaf becomes engaged to Samir, a wealthy local, her past is exposed in a public scandal at her engagement party. She is accused of adultery, murder, and other crimes, and is forced to flee Port Sudan in disgrace and terror. The city's social environment is unforgiving, quick to judge, and offers no protection or empathy for a vulnerable woman with a troubled past. Insaf's experiences with families in Khartoum. Initial hardship and homelessness. In Khartoum, Insaf arrives as a fugitive, using false names and hiding her identity. She is homeless, hungry, and at times forced to eat from garbage containers. She is initially met with indifference or suspicion by strangers and is at risk of exploitation and violence. Acts of compassion and genuine shelter. Eventually, Insaf is taken in by Haj Abdullah and his family after he finds her scavenging for food. Unlike in Port Sudan, this family offers her genuine hospitality, food, and shelter without immediate suspicion or conditions. Haj Abdullah's wife and daughters treat her with kindness, and she is gradually integrated into their family life, participating in prayers, meals, and daily routines. She is given a sense of belonging and dignity, and her spiritual and emotional well-being begins to recover. Digital warmth. Insaf's presence eventually causes tension, especially when her relationship with Deng and her legal troubles come to light. The family's support is tested by social, religious, and legal pressures, but Haj Abdullah's household remains a rare source of compassion and protection for Insaf in Khartoum. Even when the Sharia court annuls her marriage to Deng and the family faces community backlash, there is a sense of moral struggle and empathy that is largely absent in Port Sudan. Summary table. Aspect Port Sudan Khartoum, Haj Abdullah's family. Initial reception suspicion, reluctance, conditional help compassion, food, shelter, genuine welcome. Social environment hostile, judgmental, quick to scandalize, more private, protective, but still pressured by social norms. Personal safety, immediate danger, attempted assault, no support network, gradual safety, emotional and spiritual recovery. Integration, never truly accepted, always an outsider, gradually integrated, treated as family. Outcome, forced to flee in disgrace and fear, gains dignity, but faces new challenges due to legal/religious conflict. Conclusion. In Port Sudan, Insaf's experience is marked by isolation, suspicion, and public humiliation. She is never truly safe or accepted, and the city's social fabric is harsh and unforgiving. In Khartoum, especially with Hajj Abdullah's family, she finds moments of genuine compassion, shelter, and a sense of belonging, despite ongoing challenges. The contrast highlights the difference between conditional, surface-level hospitality and deeper, more meaningful acts of kindness and inclusion. Family dynamics in Port Sudan. 1. Suspicion and conditional acceptance. When Insaf arrives in Port Sudan, she is taken in by Officer Khalid's family, his wife Sulwa and mother Khadija, only because of Khalid's intervention. The household is tense. Sulwa is jealous and suspicious of Insaf, fearing she may threaten her marriage or bring shame. Khadija, the mother-in-law, is more practical but also wary, concerned about the neighbors' opinions and the family's reputation. Insaf is never fully accepted. Her presence is a source of anxiety, and her stay is conditional and precarious. Is highly sensitive to gossip and the judgment of neighbors. When Insaf's past is exposed, the family's main concern is the scandal and its impact on their social standing. There is little emotional support for Insaf. The family's actions are driven by fear of disgrace rather than compassion. The household is patriarchal, with Khaled as the authority figure, but the women, Sulwa and Khadija, are the gatekeepers of the home. Sulwa's jealousy and Khadija's pragmatism shape the atmosphere, and Insaf is treated as an outsider. Family dynamics in Khartoum. Hajj Abdullah's family. 1. Compassion and inclusion. Hajj Abdullah's family takes Insaf in after finding her destitute and hungry. Their initial response is one of genuine compassion. The family, Hajj Abdullah, his wife Maryam, and their daughters, gradually integrates Insaf into their daily life, treating her as a member of the household. There is a sense of warmth, shared meals, and spiritual togetherness, praying and breaking fast together. 2. Internal conflict and loyalty. The family faces internal conflict as Insaf's legal and social troubles escalate, especially regarding her relationship with Deng. Maryam, the wife, becomes increasingly hostile and manipulative, trying to separate Insaf from Deng and sowing distrust. Hajj Abdullah, while compassionate, is ultimately bound by social and religious norms, and his support is tested by community and legal pressures. 3. Evolving roles and tensions. The daughters are friendly and treat Insaf as a sister, but as the situation becomes more complicated, the family's unity is strained. The family's initial acceptance gives way to tension, manipulation, and, eventually, rejection when Insaf refuses to abandon Deng or conform to their expectations. Summary table. Aspect Port Sudan, Khalid's family, Khartoum, Hajj Abdullah's family. Initial attitude suspicious, conditional, self-protective compassionate, inclusive, nurturing. Emotional support minimal, focused on reputation genuine at first, but erodes under pressure. Conflict driven by jealousy, fear of scandal driven by social/religious norms, manipulation, and loyalty struggles. Outcome Insaf remains an outsider. Scapegoated Insaf is briefly included, then rejected as family fractures under pressure. Conclusion. Port Sudan. Family dynamics are dominated by suspicion, jealousy, and a preoccupation with social reputation. Insaf is never truly accepted and is ultimately scapegoated. Khartoum. Family dynamics begin with compassion and inclusion, offering Insaf a sense of belonging. However, as external pressures mount, internal conflicts and manipulation emerge, leading to eventual rejection. Here's a comparative analysis of Insaf's treatment in Pastor David's home versus Hajj Abdullah's home in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. Insaf in Pastor David's home, Khartoum, Christian family. Initial reception. Insaf, using the name Ilham, is taken in by Pastor David's family after being expelled from a hospital and rejected by other Christian families. The initial welcome is conditional and fraught with suspicion, especially from Mrs. Holly, Clementina's mother, who believes Insaf is possessed by evil spirits and tries to exorcise her. Pastor David, after some persuasion, allows Insaf to stay, but the church community is scandalized by the presence of a Muslim girl in a Christian pastor's home. And relationships. Insaf is given shelter and food, but is expected to work as a maid, doing housework and chores. She is treated with a mix of kindness and condescension. The pastor's sons, William and Andrew, become emotionally attached to her, leading to jealousy and tension. The church community and Pastor David's wife are deeply uncomfortable with Insaf's presence, fearing she will tempt the pastor or his sons and bring shame to the family. Conflict and betrayal. When rumors about Insaf's past, including accusations of murder and prostitution, reach the family, Pastor David and Mrs. Holly confront her, record her confession, and ultimately betray her trust. The family's support is withdrawn, and Insaf is threatened with being handed over to the police. She is forced to flee, feeling deeply betrayed and wounded by those who claimed to offer Christian charity. Summary. In Pastor David's home, Insaf's experience is marked by conditional acceptance, suspicion, emotional manipulation, and eventual betrayal. She is never truly trusted or integrated, and her presence is a source of conflict and scandal. Insaf in Hajj Abdullah's home, Khartoum, Muslim family. Initial reception. Hajj Abdullah finds Insaf destitute, eating from a garbage container, and brings her home out of compassion. She is welcomed warmly by Hajj Abdullah, his wife Maryam, and their daughters, who treat her as a guest and later as a family member. The family provides her with food, shelter, clothing, and emotional support, helping her recover physically and spiritually. Daily life and relationships. Insaf is gradually integrated into the family's daily routines, participating in prayers, meals, and household activities. She forms close bonds with the daughters and is treated with dignity and respect. The family's support is genuine, and Insaf experiences a sense of belonging and safety she has not felt elsewhere. Conflict and loyalty. As Insaf's legal and social troubles escalate, especially regarding her relationship with Deng and the annulment of their marriage by the Sharia court, the family faces external pressure and internal conflict. Maryam, the wife, becomes more hostile and manipulative, but Hajj Abdullah remains compassionate, though ultimately bound by social and religious norms. Even when the family is forced to distance themselves from Insaf due to legal and religious pressures, the initial compassion and warmth stand in stark contrast to her experience in Pastor David's home. Summary. In Hajj Abdullah's home, Insaf experiences genuine compassion, inclusion, and a sense of family. Although the support is eventually tested and strained by external pressures, her treatment is rooted in empathy and respect. Comparison table. Aspect Pastor David's home, Christian. Hajj Abdullah's home, Muslim. Initial reception conditional, suspicious, manipulative compassionate, warm, inclusive. Daily life made duties, emotional tension, jealousy integrated into family, dignity support. conflict, betrayal, exposure, forced to flee, loyalty tested, eventual distancing. Emotional tone, anxiety, manipulation, betrayal, empathy, belonging, respect. Outcome, rejected, traumatized, on the run, supported, then reluctantly distanced. Conclusion. Pastor David's home. Insaf is never truly accepted. Her presence is a source of tension, and she is ultimately betrayed and forced to flee. Hajj Abdullah's home. Insaf finds genuine compassion and a sense of family, though this support is eventually strained by societal and religious pressures. Impact of religious context on Insaf's life. 1. In Port Sudan and Khartoum, Islam and social control. Patriarchal authority. Insaf's life is shaped by strict Islamic norms, especially regarding gender, sexuality, and family honor. Her father, as the religious and social authority, controls her movements, education, and marriage prospects. Punitive practices. When rumors of her relationship with Deng, an African Muslim boy, spread, her family responds with religiously justified punishments, house arrest, forced circumcision, and public shaming. These actions are rationalized as protecting family honor and adhering to Islamic expectations for female purity and obedience. Community judgment. The broader Muslim community in both Port Sudan and Khartoum is quick to judge, ostracize, and scapegoat Insaf, using religious language to justify exclusion and even violence, e.g., threats of honor killing, accusations of adultery, and public trials. Two. In Pastor David's home, Christianity and conditional compassion. Conditional acceptance. Insaf is taken in by a Christian family, but her presence is controversial. The family and church community debate her worthiness for help, often referencing Christian teachings about charity, forgiveness, and the Good Samaritan. Religious suspicion. Mrs. Holly, a Pentecostal Christian, suspects Insaf of being possessed by evil spirits and tries to exorcise her. The church community is scandalized by the idea of a Muslim girl living in a pastor's home, fearing spiritual contamination and social disgrace. Manipulation and betrayal. When Insaf's past is revealed, the family's religious values are used to justify her betrayal and expulsion. Her confession is recorded and used against her, and she is threatened with police involvement. Three. In Hajj Abdullah's home, Islamic compassion and limits. Initial compassion. Hajj Abdullah's family, motivated by Islamic values of charity and hospitality, takes Insaf in when she is destitute. She is treated with dignity, included in prayers, and given a sense of belonging. Religious boundaries. As Insaf's relationship with Deng and her legal troubles escalate, the family's support is tested by religious and social norms. The annulment of her marriage by the Sharia court on the grounds of tribal incompatibility is a direct result of religious law. Ultimate exclusion. When Insaf refuses to abandon Deng or conform to religious expectations, even this compassionate family is forced to distance themselves, citing religious duty and fear of community backlash. 4. Broader societal impact. Law and punishment. Both Islamic and Christian institutions in the novel use religious doctrine to justify legal and social punishment, whether it's flogging, imprisonment, or social ostracism. Identity and belonging. Insaf's shifting religious and social identities, Muslim, Christian, apostate, accused, determine her access to safety, support, and dignity at every stage of her journey. Religious hypocrisy. The novel highlights the gap between religious ideals, compassion, justice, forgiveness, and the reality of how religious communities treat vulnerable individuals, especially women. Summary table. Context: religion's role, impact on Insaf. Port Sudan/Khartoum: Islam as social control, honor punishment, exclusion, violence. Pastor David's home: Christianity as charity, but conditional help, suspicion, betrayal. Hajj Abdullah's home: Islam as compassion, but with limits, initial inclusion, eventual exclusion. Society at large: religious law as legal/social authority, flogging, trial, exile, loss of identity. Conclusion. Religious context in The Abominable Love is a double-edged sword. It can inspire acts of compassion and hospitality, but more often it is used to justify control, exclusion, and punishment, especially of women who transgress social norms. Insaf's fate is repeatedly determined not just by individual choices, but by the religious frameworks that shape family, community, and law. If you'd like a focused analysis on a particular scene or want direct quotes, let me know. Directly on the novel's content. Role of religious law in Insaf's trials. 1. Foundation of the legal system. Insaf's trials in Sudan are conducted under a legal system where Islamic Sharia law is not only the moral code, but also the basis for criminal and civil law. The judges, prosecutors, and much of the public view her alleged crimes, adultery, murder, theft, apostasy, through the lens of religious doctrine, not just secular law. 2. Sharia law and gender. Sharia law is used to justify harsh punishments for women accused of sexual transgressions, such as flogging, imprisonment, and even death by hanging. Insaf is accused of adultery, giving birth to a bastard child, and murder. The prosecution and the court cite Quranic verses and hadiths to demand the strictest penalties, including flogging and execution. The law is applied in a way that is deeply gendered. Women are expected to uphold family honor, and any deviation is met with severe punishment. 3. Tribal and racial dimensions. Religious law is intertwined with tribal customs. Insaf's marriage to Deng is annulled by the Sharia court not only on religious grounds, but also because of inadequacy between their tribes, Arab versus African Dinka, a concept justified by some interpretations of Islamic law. The court uses religious authority to reinforce social and racial hierarchies, declaring their marriage invalid and threatening them with flogging if they continue to live as husband and wife. 4. Evidence and procedure. The court accepts confessions and accusations based on religious and social expectations rather than objective evidence. Insaf's lawyer, Siham Khalil, must defend her not only against criminal charges, but also against the weight of religious dogma and community prejudice. The court refuses to accept certain types of evidence, e.g., a virginity test, on religious grounds, and the judge's rulings are often justified by citing Quranic verses and prophetic traditions. 5. Social and political power. Religious law is wielded as a tool of social control. The threat of being labeled an apostate, adulteress, or murderer is used to silence and punish women who challenge social norms. The Minister of Religious Affairs and other religious authorities have the power to override even presidential pardons, as seen when Insaf's pardon is revoked on religious grounds. 6. Public spectacle and deterrence. The trials are public and the punishments are intended to serve as a warning to other women. The prosecutor explicitly states that harsh punishment is necessary to deter others from rebelling against religious and social norms. The court's decisions are broadcast and discussed widely, reinforcing the authority of religious law in society. Summary table. Aspect: role of religious law in Insaf's trials. Legal foundation: Sharia law is the basis for all charges and procedures. Gender and morality used to control women's sexuality and punish deviation. Tribal/racial bias justifies annulment of marriage and social exclusion. Evidence: religious doctrine shapes what is accepted as evidence. Political power. Religious authorities can override secular decisions. Public deterrence. Trials and punishments are public, meant to intimidate. Conclusion. Religious law in Insaf's trials is not just a backdrop, it is the central force shaping her fate. It determines what is considered a crime, how evidence is weighed, who is believed, and what punishments are imposed. It is used to enforce conformity, maintain social hierarchies, and punish those, especially women, who challenge the status quo. Summary: the impact of Sharia law on Insaf's trials. In The Abominable Love, Sharia law is the central legal and moral framework governing Insaf's fate in Sudan. Its influence is profound and multifaceted. One. Basis for charges and punishments. Insaf is tried for alleged crimes such as adultery, murder, theft, and apostasy, all of which are defined and punished according to Sharia law. The court and prosecutors cite Quranic verses and hadiths to justify severe penalties, including flogging and the death penalty by hanging. 2. Gender and social control. Sharia law is used to enforce strict gender roles and expectations. Insaf, as a woman, is held to standards of purity, obedience, and family honor. Her supposed sexual transgressions, real or rumored, are treated as grave offenses, and she is subjected to public shaming, harsh interrogation, and threats of corporal and capital punishment. 3. Marriage and tribal law. The annulment of Insaf's marriage to Dang is justified by the Sharia court on the grounds of inadequacy between their tribes, Arab versus African Dinka, a concept rooted in religious and tribal interpretations. The court rules that their marriage is invalid, and any continued relationship is considered adultery, punishable by flogging. 4. Evidence and procedure. The court's acceptance of evidence is shaped by religious doctrine. Confessions, rumors, and accusations are often given more weight than objective proof. Certain defenses, such as a virginity test, are rejected on religious grounds, and the judge's decisions are justified by religious texts. Five. Social and political power. Religious authorities, including the Minister of Religious Affairs, have the power to override even presidential pardons, as seen when Insaf's pardon is revoked for religious reasons. The trials are public spectacles, intended to serve as warnings to other women and reinforce religious and social conformity. In short, Sharia law determines what is considered a crime, how Insaf is judged, what evidence is accepted, and what punishments are imposed. It is used to enforce social control, maintain gender and tribal hierarchies, and justify harsh, often irreversible, penalties. Insaf's trials are less about individual justice and more about upholding religious and social order. If you'd like a more detailed breakdown of a specific trial scene or direct quotes from the novel, just let me know. Scenes from Insaf's Sharia court trial. 1. The setting and atmosphere. The Sharia court is depicted as a formal, intimidating environment, dominated by elderly male judges dressed in traditional Islamic attire. The proceedings are public, with a large audience present, including religious leaders, government officials, and ordinary citizens. The atmosphere is tense and charged with religious fervor. Quranic verses and hadiths are cited frequently, and the language of the court is deeply rooted in Islamic law and tradition. 2. The charges and prosecution. Insaf faces multiple charges: adultery, murder, theft, apostasy, and violating religious and social norms. The prosecutor opens with a sermon-like speech, quoting the Quran and emphasizing the need for harsh punishment to deter others, especially women, from similar crimes. The charges are read aloud, and the prosecutor calls for the maximum penalties, including flogging and death by hanging. 3. The defense. Insaf's lawyer, Siham Khalil, is a bold and intelligent woman who faces hostility for her gender and secular outlook. She is criticized for her appearance and for speaking in public. Siham presents a detailed defense, challenging the evidence and exposing inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. She brings forward witnesses, presents alternative explanations, and highlights the role of prejudice, rumor, and social pressure in the accusations against Insaf. The lawyer's arguments are often interrupted by the judges or the audience, who accuse her of indecency or disrespect for religious law. 4. The role of religious law. The judges frequently cite Quranic verses and hadiths to justify their rulings and to dismiss the defense's arguments. The court refuses to accept certain types of evidence, such as a virginity test, on religious grounds. The annulment of Insaf's marriage to Deng is justified by the Sharia law of inadequacy between their tribes, reinforcing racial and social hierarchies. 5. Public spectacle and emotional impact. The trial is a public spectacle, with the audience reacting emotionally, sometimes with cheers, sometimes with outrage. Insaf is paraded before the court in revealing clothing, intended to shame her and reinforce the perception of her as a fallen woman. The proceedings are humiliating and traumatic for Insaf, who is often silenced or ignored when she tries to speak for herself. 6. The verdict and aftermath. The court acquits Insaf of some charges, such as the murder of her husband and friend, after her lawyer exposes the truth, but convicts her of others, especially those related to religious and sexual transgressions. The final verdict is harsh. Insaf is sentenced to death by hanging for the murder of the pimp and to flogging for adultery and other offenses. The trial's outcome is intended as a warning to other women and as a reaffirmation of the authority of Sharia law. Key themes in the trial scenes. Religious law as both legal and moral authority. Gender and racial bias in the application of justice. Public humiliation and the use of spectacle to enforce conformity. The struggle of a woman and her defender against a system stacked against them. Based on The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, the 3 judges of the Sharia court condemned the marriage of Insaf to Deng for several interrelated reasons, all rooted in religious law, tribal custom, and racial prejudice. 1. Lack of guardian's consent for a virgin. The judges argued that, according to Sharia law, a virgin Muslim woman cannot marry without the explicit consent and presence of her father or legal guardian. Insaf's marriage to Deng was performed with Haj Abdullah acting as her guardian, not her biological father, Haj Sulla. The court stated that a woman cannot appoint her own guardian and that only her father, or a direct male guardian, can authorize her marriage if she is a virgin. Since Insaf's father did not give permission, the marriage was declared invalid. 2. Tribal and racial inadequacy. The judges invoked the Sharia concept of kafah, compatibility or sufficiency, which, in their interpretation, means that a marriage can be annulled if the husband and wife are not from compatible tribes or social backgrounds. Deng is from the Dinka tribe, South Sudan, African, while Insaf is from the Shakia tribe, Northern Sudan, Arab. The judges ruled that this tribal and racial difference made the marriage inadequate and thus invalid under Sharia law as practiced in their context. 3. Invalidity of adoption as a basis for guardianship. Haj Abdullah, who acted as Insaf's guardian, was not her biological father, but had taken her in as a daughter. The judges ruled that adoption is not recognized in Islamic law for the purposes of guardianship in marriage contracts. Therefore, Haj Abdullah had no legal right to act as her guardian. 4. No consummation of previous marriage. The judges debated whether Insaf was a widow, which would allow her to choose her own husband, or still a virgin. They concluded that her previous marriage to Haj Taha was not consummated, since he died on the wedding night, so she was still considered a virgin under Sharia law, and thus still required her father's consent for any subsequent marriage. 5. Social and racial prejudice. The court proceedings and the statements of the judges and Insaf's father made it clear that deep-seated racial prejudice played a role. The judges and her father openly stated that a free white Arab girl should not marry a black African Negro slave, and that such a union was unacceptable both socially and religiously. Summary table. Reason for condemnation explanation. Lack of guardian's consent. Only a father/guardian can marry off a virgin. Insaf's father did not consent. Tribal/racial incompatibility, kafeh. Marriage annulled due to inadequacy between Arab and African tribes. Invalid adoption, as guardianship. Haj Abdullah's guardianship was not valid under Sharia law. No consummation of prior marriage. Insaf was still considered a virgin, so needed her father's consent. Social/racial prejudice. Judges and father cited Arab/African difference as unacceptable. In summary, the Sharia court condemned and annulled Insaf and Deng's marriage because it lacked the legal consent of her biological father, was deemed tribally and racially inadequate, and was performed under a guardianship not recognized by Islamic law. These legalistic and social arguments were all reinforced by underlying racial and cultural prejudice. If you'd like direct quotes from the trial scene or a more detailed breakdown, let me know. Certainly. Here's an explanation of kafah and its role in the annulment of Insaf and Deng's marriage, based on The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. What is kafah? Kafah, Arabic, is an Islamic legal concept meaning compatibility or suitability in marriage. Traditionally, it refers to the idea that a marriage should be between partners who are compatible in certain key aspects, such as religion, social status, lineage, and sometimes profession or wealth. In some interpretations, tribal background and ethnicity are also considered. Purpose. The stated purpose is to protect the interests and reputation of the woman and her family, and to ensure social harmony. Application. While the Quran emphasizes piety as the main criterion for marriage, many traditional Islamic societies have interpreted kafah more broadly, including tribal, racial, and social factors. Kafah's role in the annulment of Insaf and Deng's marriage. In the novel, the Sharia court uses the doctrine of kafah to annul the marriage between Insaf, an Arab woman from the Shakia tribe, and Deng, an African man from the Dinka tribe. 1. Tribal and racial inadequacy. The judges argue that, under Sharia law as practiced in their context, there must be sufficiency, or compatibility kafah, between the husband and wife, especially regarding tribe and race. Deng, being from the Dinka tribe, South Sudan, African, is deemed inadequate or not compatible with Insaf, who is from a northern Sudanese Arab tribe. The judges and Insaf's father openly state that a free white Arab girl should not marry a black African Negro slave, and that such a union is unacceptable both socially and religiously. 2. Legal justification for annulment. The court rules that, because of this lack of kafah, the marriage is invalid even though both parties are Muslim and the marriage was performed according to Islamic rites. The judges cite the right of the woman's father, or guardian, to object to a marriage on the grounds of incompatibility and to request its annulment if he believes the husband is not a suitable match for his daughter. 3. Consequences. The marriage is annulled, and Insaf and Deng are warned that if they continue to live together as husband and wife, they will be considered to be committing adultery, punishable by flogging or stoning under Sharia law. The ruling is presented as divinely inspired and irrevocable, even overriding the couple's wishes and the fact that they are both practicing Muslims. Summary table. Aspect of kafah application in Insaf and Deng's case. Definition: compatibility in marriage, tribe, race, status. Basis for annulment: judges claim Arab/African difference is inadequate. Legal mechanism: father/guardian can object and request annulment. Outcome: marriage annulled. Couple threatened with punishment if they remain together. In summary, kafah was used by the Sharia court as a legal and religious justification to annul Insaf and Deng's marriage based on their tribal and racial differences. This doctrine allowed the court to override the couple's consent and religious compatibility, enforcing social and racial hierarchies under the guise of religious law. Here are direct quotes from the Sharia court trial scene of Insaf and Deng, as found in The Abominable Love, a novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. Direct quotes from the Sharia court trial scene. On the complaint and opening, the court clerk read aloud, Hajj Salah al-Junaid, a citizen of the city of Gadarif, from the Arab Shakia tribe, and a follower of the Ansar al-Sunnah al-Nabawiyya Mohammadiyya group, today presents to you his complaint against Deng Nasser, a black African Negro citizen from South Sudan who belongs to the Dinka tribe. This black African Negro man married the free white Arab daughter of Hajj Salah, Insaf, without asking his permission. According to the Holy Prophet Muhammad, any Islamic marriage without the presence of the father as guardian is adultery, and the wife is considered adulteress. On tribal and racial incompatibility, kafah. In this case, we can dissolve their marriage according to the Sharia law of inadequacy between the wife and her husband, the chief judge said. On the judge's reasoning, Maulana Yassin asked angrily, then why didn't you go and knock on the door of her free Arab father and ask for her hand in marriage from him? The African husband, Deng, said sadly, because her free Arab father threw her on the streets. Maulana Sharif al-Din shouted with astonishment and perseverance, Hajj Salah, did you throw your free Arab daughter into the streets? Hajj Salah answered angrily while his reddened eyes sparkled, I am not such an evil father as to throw my free Arab daughter into the streets. This damned rebellious and disobedient daughter ran away from my home and married this black Negro boy without my permission. On the annulment, the principal judge Maulana Yassin said, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, we, the three members of this blessed court of Allah and His Messenger, announce from today onwards the annulment of the marriage contract between Deng Majak Nasser and Insaf, the daughter of Hajj Salah al-Junaid, based on the law of inadequacy or insufficiency between the tribe of the husband and the tribe of the wife. On the consequences, Maulana Sharif al-Din said seriously, listen to my words, Deng Majak Nasser, your marital relationship before today with Insaf Salah al-Junaid was legitimate. If you had a child born or in the womb before this day with this Arab girl, then this child is also legitimate. However, if it is proven that after this day onwards you remain together and commit adultery as a man and a woman, you will be guilty of violating the law of God and His Messenger, and you will be arrested and severely punished according to the Sharia law, which is either flogging or stoning. Breakdown of the scene. Complaint and opening. Insaf's father files a complaint, emphasizing the racial and tribal difference and the lack of guardian consent. Judicial interrogation. The judges interrogate Deng and Insaf about the circumstances of their marriage, focusing on whether Insaf's father gave permission and whether the marriage was performed with a valid guardian. Discussion of kafah compatibility. The judges debate the concept of inadequacy kafah between the tribes, citing Islamic tradition and social custom to argue that an Arab woman cannot marry an African man from a different tribe without her father's approval. Annulment pronouncement. The chief judge formally announces the annulment of the marriage, citing the law of tribal incompatibility. Aftermath. The ruling devastates Insaf and Deng, who are told their relationship is now illegal and any continued relationship will be considered adultery, punishable by flogging or stoning. Reactions in detail. 1. Initial shock and scrutiny. When the case is presented, the three elderly Sharia judges react with a mix of surprise, skepticism, and scrutiny. They are visibly disturbed by the idea that a free white Arab girl has married a black African Negro from the Dinka tribe without her father's permission. Quote, Maulana Yassin wondered in confusion, did you marry your beautiful white Arab daughter to this black African Negro? 2. Focus on guardianship and procedure. The judges immediately focus on the legal technicality of guardianship. They interrogate Deng and Insaf about whether her father gave permission for the marriage. When it is revealed that Haj Abdullah, not her biological father, acted as her guardian, the judges become stern and dismissive. Quote, Maulana Sharif al-Din shouted angrily at Deng, "Did you marry this girl without asking her father for her hand in marriage?" Deng replied, "Yes, sir." Maulana al-Amin shouted with extreme anger as sparks flew from his eyes, "Why did you do that? Is she your slave girl that you bought from the slave market in Omdurman city, or did she the street girl with no Arab family or home?" 3. Racial and tribal prejudice. The judges' reactions are heavily influenced by racial and tribal prejudice. They openly express that such a marriage is unacceptable due to the difference in tribal and racial background. Quote, "So, you rejected this black Muslim boy because your daughter is Arab, and he is an African man?" asked Maulana al-Amin. Haj Salah answered frankly, "Yes, this is the truth. My daughter is a free, white Arab girl. Her grandfather is Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Holy Prophet, and this black boy is a southern Dinka Negro slave." 4. Invocation of Kafah compatibility. The judges invoke the doctrine of Kafah compatibility, arguing that the marriage is invalid due to inadequacy between the tribes. Quote, "In this case, we can dissolve their marriage according to the Sharia law of inadequacy between the wife and her husband," the chief judge said. 5. Legalistic and religious justification. The judges justify their decision by citing religious law and tradition. They debate whether Insaf is a widow or a virgin, and ultimately decide that since her previous marriage was not consummated, she is still a virgin and thus required her father's consent. Quote, Maulana Yassin said, "Our blessed judges, both of you have misunderstood the law of God and His Messenger. Haj Taha's marriage to this disobedient wife cannot be called an Islamic marriage because he did not have sex with her." 6. Pronouncement of annulment and warning. The chief judge formally announces the annulment of the marriage and warns that any continued relationship will be considered adultery, punishable by flogging or stoning. Quote, "The principal judge Maulana Yassin said, 'In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, we, the three members of this blessed court of Allah and His Messenger, announce from today onwards the annulment of the marriage contract between Deng Majak Nasser and Insaf, the daughter of Haj Salah al-Junaid, based on the law of inadequacy or insufficiency between the tribe of the husband and the tribe of the wife.'" Maulana Sharif al-Din said seriously, "Listen to my words. Deng Majak Nasser, your marital relationship before today with Insaf Salah al-Junaid was legitimate. If you had a child born or in the womb before this day with this Arab girl, then this child is also legitimate. However, if it is proven that after this day onwards you remain together and commit adultery as a man and a woman, you will be guilty of violating the law of God and His Messenger, and you will be arrested and severely punished according to the Sharia law, which is either flogging or stoning." 7. Emotional and social impact. The judges' reactions are not just legalistic, but also emotional and performative. They are conscious of the public, the family's honor, and the precedent their ruling sets for society. Summary of judges' attitude. Rigid adherence to Sharia technicalities, guardianship, consummation, kafah. Open racial and tribal prejudice. Religious and social conservatism. Emphasis on public morality and deterrence. Lack of empathy for the couple's love or suffering. A Sharia court trial. 1. Authoritative and stern. The judges speak with the full weight of religious and legal authority. Their tone is commanding, formal, and often intimidating. They expect deference and obedience from all parties in the courtroom. Example. Maulana Sharif al-Din shouted angrily at Deng, "Did you marry this girl without asking her father for her hand in marriage?" 2. Rigid and legalistic. They are rigidly focused on the letter of Sharia law and traditional procedure, showing little flexibility or empathy for individual circumstances. Their demeanor is that of strict enforcers of religious doctrine. Example: Maulana Yasin asked angrily, "Then why didn't you go and knock on the door of her free Arab father and ask for her hand in marriage from him?" 3. Dismissive and prejudiced. The judges display open prejudice, especially regarding race and tribal status. Their language is dismissive of Deng's and Insaf's explanations, and they are quick to reinforce social and racial hierarchies. Example: "So, you rejected this black Muslim boy because your daughter is Arab and he is an African man?" Haj Silla answered frankly, "Yes, this is the truth. My daughter is a free, white Arab girl, and this black boy is a Southern Dinka Negro slave." 4. Didactic and sermonizing. They often use their platform to lecture the parties and the audience, quoting religious texts and offering moral judgments. Their speech is sometimes more like a sermon than a legal proceeding. Example: "In this case, we can dissolve their marriage according to the Sharia law of inadequacy between the wife and her husband," the chief judge said. 5. Cold and unyielding. When delivering their verdict, the judges are emotionally detached and unyielding. They present their decision as divinely inspired and final, leaving no room for appeal or compassion. Example: "We, the 3 members of this blessed court of Allah and His Messenger, announce from today onwards the annulment of the marriage contract between Deng Majak Nasser and Insaf, the daughter of Haj Silla al-Junaid, based on the law of inadequacy or insufficiency between the tribe of the husband and the tribe of the wife." 6. Public and performative. Their demeanor is also performative, conscious of the public and the precedent their ruling sets. They are aware that their words and actions are being watched and will serve as a warning to others. Summary: authoritative, stern, and commanding. Rigidly legalistic and dismissive of personal stories. Openly prejudiced, especially regarding race and tribe. Didactic, often sermonizing and quoting scripture. Cold, unyielding, and emotionally detached in verdict. Conscious of public spectacle and social impact. Certainly. Here's a comparison of the judge's tone and demeanor in the Sharia court trial from The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, contrasted with what is typical in modern secular courts. Judge's tone and demeanor in the Sharia court, from the novel. Authoritative and stern, the judges speak with commanding authority, expecting deference and obedience. Their tone is often harsh, especially when addressing the accused or anyone challenging tradition. Rigid and legalistic, they are inflexible, strictly adhering to religious law and custom, showing little empathy for individual circumstances. Prejudiced and dismissive, the judges openly express racial and tribal biases, dismissing the legitimacy of Insaf and Deng's marriage based on their backgrounds. Didactic and sermonizing, their speech often resembles sermons, quoting scripture and moralizing to the audience and defendants. Cold and unyielding, when delivering verdicts, they are emotionally detached, presenting their decisions as divinely inspired and final. Public and performative, they are conscious of the public nature of the trial, using it as a spectacle to reinforce social and religious norms. Example from the novel. Maulana Sharif al-Din shouted angrily at Deng, "Did you marry this girl without asking her father for her hand in marriage?" In this case, we can dissolve their marriage according to the Sharia law of inadequacy between the wife and her husband, the chief judge said. Judges' tone and demeanor in modern secular courts. Impartial and respectful, modern judges are expected to maintain neutrality, treating all parties with respect regardless of background. Procedurally focused, they follow established legal procedures and rules of evidence, rather than personal or religious beliefs. Non-prejudicial, open expressions of racial, religious, or social bias are strictly prohibited and can be grounds for appeal or judicial discipline. Measured and professional, Judges avoid emotional outbursts, sermonizing, or moralizing. Their language is formal, measured, and focused on the facts and law. Empathetic but detached. While empathy may be shown, especially in sentencing, judges are expected to remain emotionally detached and base decisions on law and evidence. Private and dignified. Trials are conducted with dignity, and the judge's role is not to create a spectacle, but to ensure justice is served fairly and transparently. Summary table. Aspect: Sharia court, novel, modern secular court. Tone: stern, didactic, sometimes harsh, measured, impartial, respectful. Demeanor: authoritative, sermonizing, performative, professional, neutral, dignified. Bias: openly prejudiced, tribal, racial, gender. Bias strictly prohibited. Focus: religious law, social order, public morality, legal procedure, individual rights. Public role: spectacle, deterrence, moral lesson, justice, transparency, fairness. Conclusion. In the novel, the Sharia court judge's tone is stern, moralizing, and openly prejudiced, using the trial as a public lesson in conformity. In contrast, modern secular judges are expected to be neutral, respectful, and focused on legal procedure and fairness, with no tolerance for bias or public shaming.